Sit back down again.
Now.
Marvellous. Peter Lamb.
Thank you. I beg to move the bill be now read a second time. Madam Deputy Speaker, I am very grateful for my good fortune in having the chance to move a bill in my first year as a member of this House, and to seek to address, in part, one of my greatest policy concerns, childhood poverty. The last Labour government made reducing child poverty one of their most significant missions in office, and research by the Institute for Fiscal Studies has demonstrated that without the changes that they had made to benefits, child poverty by 2010 would have increased by over a quarter. Instead, it fell by over a quarter. It was a remarkable achievement under the circumstances. Unfortunately, the actions of the Conservatives over the years since have reversed much of this good work, and today, in one of the wealthiest countries in the world, almost a third of our children, innocents who have no control whatsoever over their personal circumstances, are living in poverty. Harold Wilson famously said that the Labour Party is a moral crusade or it is nothing. If this government is to be judged on anything over the next 5 years, let it be how it treats the most vulnerable members of our society. Like many members of my party, I have found the decision not to immediately lift the child benefit cap extremely painful. We do not need further reports on how this has been one of the most significant drivers of child poverty under the last government. And at this point, I do not believe the bookshelves of the House of Commons Library could support any more evidence were it to be submitted. However, I do accept that £3.2 billion cannot simply be found overnight. If we are serious about ending childhood poverty, we need to consider all of the issues in the round, and the Child Poverty Task Force is a vital part of ensuring that limited public money is used most effectively to address this crisis. But what can we do here today, while we await the findings of that task force, to try and improve the conditions of those children living in poverty? Members will be aware that private members' bills cannot authorise new expenditure, and I don't seek to challenge that. This bill simply seeks to ensure that those children, which this House has already stated should receive free meals at school, actually receive them automatically unless parents actively opt out of the system. Not a penny more expenditure than necessary to fulfil the social contract which generations of this Parliament have sustained with our poorest children. And these are our poorest children. To qualify for free school meals requires a combined household income of £7,400 or less, an income of roughly half the average rent in my constituency. I find it hard to believe that it is possible to sustain a household on such a low income, and it is these children that this bill is looking to support. The stories you hear of child poverty are heartbreaking, not only of the hunger and the impact upon their performance at school, but of the stigma, of the stories of children pretending to bring food out of their bags so they can fit in with their friends at school, even when there is nothing available on that point.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. Us former council leaders have to stick together, and I'll pay tribute to him for bringing this bill forward. I, myself, as I mentioned in my maiden speech, was a recipient of free school meals, and I remember that stigma. That stigma stays with me today as I went and got a blue ticket to get lunch where my friends got a yellow one, and that runs very deep in me. Does he agree with me that the government's poverty task force has to see everything in the round, and we should welcome the government's announcements on free breakfast clubs and the trial of those breakfast clubs, which will be rolled out? And does he agree with me that we need to see urgency from the government and the Minister, as I'm sure he will do, to address this as a systematic look at families and children in poverty?
I absolutely agree, and I'm very grateful to my friend for his intervention. The government is doing a lot to try and address this issue, which isn't to say that we can't try and do more as part of this. And on the point of stigma, which I was really concluding on, that children are now pretending to bring food out of their bags so that they don't miss out at school or don't appear not to fit in, even if they do not have the actual food. And we should be very glad that over the years since, the system of free school meals has now changed so that you cannot tell which children are in receipts of free school meals, which hopefully is a point I'll come back to, but hopefully will encourage parents to make use of the available option for them. Free school meals are estimated to save roughly £500 per child. Against such a low income, this amount would make a huge difference. And for a child affected by the two-child benefit cap, we're looking at increasing their income by over a fifth or more. So why, given the difference that it could make to their household, isn't every eligible family claiming? There are a range of reasons. In some cases, there is the belief that their children might be bullied due to being in receipt of a free school meal, the point that was made by my honourable friend. And if there is one immediate outcome of this debate, I hope it's to reinforce the message to parents that absolutely no one can now identify which child is on a free school meal. There is no stigma in claiming. Please, please make the application. We know also that the same barriers exist as with any other form of state support, where barriers of language, of agency, of awareness and ability ensure that those facing the greatest disadvantages in our society are those least likely to access the support available. And these are the families who would benefit most from this legislation.
Thank you. Thank you for giving way. This bill is so important exactly because of what the Honourable Member has just said. It removes administrative barriers which get in the way, but actually quite frequently can be overcome quite sensibly. I think importantly it still provides an opt-out for parents, which is important because not everybody would want that for their child. Does he agree with me that this government should do everything they can to remove any administrative barriers for things like this?
I mean, it's been a while since I've looked at the numbers. My understanding when I last looked was that when we look at the level of unclaimed benefits in our system, that it is at least 10 times greater than the total value of benefit fraud in the system. People are by and large choosing not to access support available, sometimes because of stigma, sometimes because of a lack of awareness about it, but the impact upon that within our society is real, and we really should be doing everything we can to reduce the stigma around all of this. We all pay in, so there is a safety net for us when we need it, and to be sure that the other members of our community, our neighbours, the people who we care about, don't have to go without when they fall upon difficult times. And we should try everything possible to try and avoid the vilification which is disgustingly very often put upon people simply because they are poor. Beyond the moral argument, this is about the future of our country. Education is an investment in the future prosperity of our country and of our citizens. It is the bedrock of economic growth and of enabling people to live independent and successful lives. And auto-enrolment stands to improve educational outcomes in 3 ways. The most obvious means is through reducing hunger, the impact of which upon concentration and educational performance is well known. School meals were introduced 120 years ago next year to ensure that children received at least one nutritious meal per day so that they could function effectively. Secondly, by improving household incomes. Household incomes positively correlated with educational outcomes. In fact, there is a double-digit improvement in performance at GCSE level between children in the lowest and second lowest income deciles. And that improvement continues all the way up in decreasing amounts until we hit the third highest decile, where, for all the amounts spent on private schools, educational outcomes plateau across that top 30% of incomes.
For the speech that he's making, and really putting child poverty at the heart of his speech. On educational outcomes, would you also agree with me that by auto-enrolling children, it means that schools are able to take advantage of many of the gateway supports that are premised on how many children at that school are on free school meals, which schools are not getting. And also, I'm sure he will have had the same experience as I, as speaking to schools that are carrying quite a heavy level of debt, which is school dinner debt, because the schools themselves are having to provide meals for hungry children.
Absolutely, on that whole point, I'm well aware of the local schools about the amount of effort that they are having to do directly to deal with the consequences of financial deprivation as part of this. And it is very important that we try and ensure that the statistics around free school meals are accurate, because it is a gateway to support. It is also how we measure any number of indicators in society around poverty. And if there is a statistical link between some groups under-reporting compared to other groups, then we will have inaccurate figures throughout society around where deprivation is and how best to try and address that particular problem. Last but not least, on that particular point, there is pupil premium of £1,455 per pupil, which is designed to counter the impact of deprivation upon educational outcomes. A payment schools receive on the basis of the number of pupils in receipt of free school meals. And low uptake of free school meals is now directly limiting the funding available to those schools where it would make the most amount of difference to educational outcomes. As a government which is ambitious for the education of our children and committed to securing high levels of economic growth, the failure to address these matters of deprivation are a hurdle that we're going to have to clear if we're going to succeed. This is well recognised. The Education Committee recently reported that we consider that the arguments for auto-enrolment in free school meals for those children currently eligible are conclusive. In the interest of alleviating hunger in schools and improving health and educational outcomes for the poorest children, auto-enrolment must be brought in without delay. Pilots run by local authorities, which quite heavily bend the rules of current legislation to try and get as many of their children as possible registered, over recent years have repeatedly shown the scale of under-registration and the impact which auto-enrolment could have both for those families benefiting and for school funding in deprived communities. The government's own figures suggest under-registration stands at a minimum of 11%, equivalent to 250,000 children, although research nationally and in my own constituency suggests the overall figure could well be significantly higher. And it is worth noting that the £7,400 income threshold cuts off the overwhelming majority of children who are living in poverty in this country and who still do not qualify for free school meals. This is something which should certainly be corrected in due course, but for now this bill will make the most amount of difference to the very poorest children, benefiting them, their families, their schools, and through improvements in educational outcomes, society at large. I accept that the mess that the new government has inherited from the last and the economic uncertainty created by decisions currently being taken in Washington means that it may be too much to expect a wholesale adoption of the policy today. But I would hope that the Minister, who has been generous with his time with me in this matter and demonstrated his commitment to increasing the uptake of free school meals, will be able to give a commitment that auto-enrolment will be given serious consideration as part of the work now being undertaken to bring an end to childhood poverty in the United Kingdom. And I hope that the debate today will serve to underline the support amongst members of this House in bringing about this change on behalf of our most vulnerable constituents. Surely the very least that our country has a right to expect of its Parliament is that we will ensure that the nation's children are fed.
Sharon Hodgson.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's a privilege to honour...
Forgive me, in my rush, I should have said, the question is that the bill be now read a second time. Miss Sharon Hodgson.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. And it's a privilege to follow my friend, the Honourable Member for Mansfield. And I'm so happy that he was able to be drawn in the private members' bill ballot, but also have chosen this excellent subject and most important topic for his private members' bill. School food has been available, as my honourable friend said, for almost 120 years, thanks to a little known by most MP for Bradford called Fred Jewett, who introduced the concept in his private members' bill in 1906. So he follows in the footsteps of a previous great man. So I thank him for that. Free school meals have existed in one form or another for the best part of 80 years. And so that is countless generations of children who have received a hot, nutritious meal at lunchtime. Free school meals are life-changing for pupils, and no one knows that better than myself. Growing up as a recipient of free school meals from almost the day I started school to the day I left school, that knowledge that there would be food at lunchtime gave my mum, me and my brothers the security that going into the rest of the school day I wouldn't be hungry. And I echo those feelings of stigma that my honourable friend and the member for Telford spoke of just before. I also recall having a different dinner ticket, and even worse, having a different meal queue to stand in. And our queue was served after the paid-for children were served. It's horrifying, I know, but I'm glad to say that doesn't happen anymore. Children aren't made to be separated in such a abhorrent way, but the stigma is still very real and alive today, no matter how hard schools try to alleviate it with cashless systems, etc. Ask any child in school who are the children on free school meals and they will look to them straight away. They all know. I've been over 20 years to many, many schools, and I always ask them, and they always nod sheepishly that they know, sometimes because they are that very child, but other times because they know who the other children are. So that never leaves you, that stigma, it stays with you. And we should not, in the 6th richest country in the world, be subjecting our richest economy, we should not be subjecting our children in school to that stigma any longer. So we are all aware, though, of the countless and cross-cutting benefits of free school meals. So I won't waste the House's time, Madam Deputy Speaker, on relisting them all. Just to say, from increased attendance, attainment and more, free school meals are a multifaceted policy that has widespread benefits across society. I'm proud to be the founding and current chair of the School Food All-Party Group since 2010, a group which was very instrumental in shaping the Universal Infant Free School Meal Scheme, along with the authors of the School Food Plan, Henry Dimbleby and John Vincent, and we are still in discussion regarding the best delivery of Universal Primary Breakfast Club programme. We want to help the MPs involved and all the stakeholders who number, I think it's 300 now. We all want the early adopter programme to be the huge success we all want it to be. The all-party group met only yesterday, Madam Deputy Speaker, and the Wilson room was packed. It is always well attended from school food stakeholders. We had around 50 there yesterday in attendance, but I've known us to fill committee room 14 with 80 to 100 attendees, and I hope the Minister, he has an open invitation to be able to attend when his diary allows. The early adopters scheme, due to roll out to the first 750 schools this April, will show us where learnings can be taken for a smooth introduction to all primary schools next year. But, as my honourable friend, the member for Crawley, has already said, this government can and should go further. We can make marginal, low-cost improvements to the statutory scheme of free school meals that we currently have by introducing an opt-out system as outlined in this bill. We will capture around 200,000 children who are eligible for this crucial support but who currently aren't receiving it. Admin barriers should not mean that 1 in 10 students whose household income is already below the 7,400 threshold before benefits miss out on free school meal support when they need it most. This bill on auto-enrolment cannot be seen as extra spending. Government funding already exists for the children who aren't claiming this statutory support, so it is the lowest of low-hanging fruit. Moreover, increased free school meal uptake goes on to unlock, as we've heard, a whole host of other benefits too. This includes vital pupil premium funding of up to £1,455 extra per child, and if this House wants to talk about better education funding, surely unlocking funding that already exists is the most logical and economically efficient way of doing it. So in closing, extending free school meals by automatic registration is to these most needy 200,000 children should be a no-brainer for any government and a moral imperative for this Labour government. I hope to see this government and this minister rectify this at their earliest opportunity. Thank you.
I now call the Shadow Minister, Mike Hood.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I congratulate the honourable gentleman, the member for Crawley, on moving this bill so ably. The last Conservative government massively expanded eligibility for free school meals, meaning that the proportion of children and young people who are eligible for free school meals is much higher than was the case under any previous government. And the evidence here proves that the inheritance we left behind in this area last July was much kinder than that which the Labour government left us in 2010, with 1 in 3 children being able to get a free school meal, as opposed to 1 in 6 when the previous Labour government was last in office, despite a large fall in the number of workless households. I will give way, of course.
We see in the bodies of children increased stunting, with the average 10-year-old a centimetre shorter than they were in 2010. How does that square with what the Minister's saying? We see a malnutrition crisis.
I think when you look at dietary habits in recent decades, actually that's not confined to parts of the income spectrum. There has been a deterioration in the quality of diets going back over several decades that is quite separate from issues of poverty. But as of January 2024, more than 2.1 million pupils were eligible for benefits-related free school meals, which amounted to 24.6% of all pupils. In addition, more than 90,000 disadvantaged students in further education received a free school meal at lunchtime. Collectively, this supported the children and young people who needed it most to ensure that they could make the most of their world-class education, boost their health, and save their parents considerable amounts that they could not afford. I really must continue because I know that the government has promised the move for the next bill that he can begin at 1:45. So I do need to keep the interventions to a minimum. We also introduced extensive protection, which have been in effect since 2018. They ensure that while universal credit is being fully rolled out, any child eligible for free school meals would retain their entitlement and keep getting free school meals until the end of the phase. In other words, until they completed either primary or secondary school, even if their family's income rose above the income threshold such that this would otherwise have stopped. On breakfast clubs, we all know that breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Setting people up with the fuel they need to make the most of the day ahead, and the evidence supports this. For children, and I ought to have added at this point, Madam Deputy Speaker, that I probably ought to declare an interest in that my wife is in teaching, although she's providing one-to-one teaching and special needs rather than in a classroom at the moment. But for children, we know that those who do not have breakfast are more likely to have issues with behaviour, with well-being and with learning. And that is why the previous government expanded the provision of breakfast, investing up to £35 million in the National School Breakfast Programme. This funding supported 2,700 schools in disadvantaged areas, providing thousands of children with children from low-income families with a free, nutritious breakfast at school to support their attainment, their well-being, and their readiness to learn. Moreover, we trusted school leaders to deliver, building a breakfast provision that fitted the needs of their pupils. This involved 5 different models, ranging from a traditional breakfast club to a healthy grab-and-go. This programme has had great success in supporting those who needed it most, and I welcome the confirmation from the Minister that his party will continue to support this programme until at least next March, and I hope that the support extends past that date. But nutrition does not cease to be an issue outside of term time, which is why the previous government rolled out the Holiday Activities and Food Programme to support disadvantaged and low-income families who are in receipt of free school meals during the holiday periods. Since 2018, this programme has delivered enriching activities and nutritious food to the children and young people who needed it most, with more than £200 million each year, delivering 15.6 million half days to children and young people across every single one of the 153 local authorities in England. Turning to this bill would require local authorities in England to identify each child of school-age resident in its area who is eligible for free school meals, and also require state-funded schools that identify a child who is eligible to provide those meals. And we support the desire to make sure that all those eligible for free school meals have an opportunity to receive them, and so do not wish to prevent this bill from proceeding. But I do have a couple of questions just around how the bill will achieve that hopefully the sponsoring member may be able to address in his closing remarks so that members may consider it as the bill proceeds. So I know the honourable member has extensive experience within local local government, and I think it's 20 local authorities have now piloted their own auto-enrolment schemes at some point. So I'd be interested to hear what consideration he has given in drafting this bill to the burden that will be added to local authorities, and whether he has any assessment, any measure of the cost that it would mean for local council taxpayers, and how that relates to both the savings for local families, but also, of course, the additional income for the schools through pupil premiums. The bill would also give the powers for to the Secretary of State to make regulations to make provision for the definition of the term state-funded school. We're interested in what circumstances the honourable member believes a change in definition will be necessary. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, I will be clear here today, as we were clear in government, that we believe in targeting support to where it is most needed. We do believe that the state should do less but do it well, but that does include delivering sufficient support to those who need it most, and particularly to children and young people.
I call the Minister Stephen Morgan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank my honourable friend, the member for Crawley, for his bill and providing the opportunity to consider the importance that free, nutritious meals have in breaking the link between background and achievement. I know that he is a true champion for his constituents and for children and families across the country, and I was delighted to meet with him to discuss this bill and hear how passionate he is about our opportunity mission. I also thank my honourable friend for Washington and Gateshead South, who I know has been a champion for free school meal provision in this place for a considerable amount of time, and I also thank her for her leadership on the APPG. I'm proud to serve under this mission-driven government that is breaking down the barriers to opportunity for every child in every part of our country, and we currently spend around £1.5 billion annually on the free lunches for 2.1 million school pupils under benefits-based free school meals, alongside over 90,000 disadvantaged students in further education and around 1.3 million infants under the universal infant free school meals. Madam Deputy Speaker, at their core, we consider the aim of these measures is to ensure those who need it get the support that they are entitled to, which, of course, is a goal we are supportive of. Free lunch programmes provide pupils with essential nutrition, support attendance, and ultimately ensure that pupils can concentrate, learn, and get the most out of their education. They're essential to breaking down barriers to opportunity and tackling child poverty, a task which is more important than ever as a result of the legacy of rising child poverty left behind by the previous government. Shamefully, there are 700,000 more children in poverty more than in 2010, and over 4 million children are now growing up in a low-income family. That's why I'm proud of a new ministerial task force working urgently to develop a child poverty strategy to address this. The Child Poverty Task Force is considering a range of levers to tackle child poverty, including key cost drivers for households, such as food, to develop a comprehensive strategy which will be published later this year. This is in addition to action that we are already taking to deliver on our mission to break down barriers to opportunity by rolling out free breakfast clubs in every state-funded primary school, providing food and childcare to children and to socialise them before the school day, and put more money back into parents' pockets, on average £450 per year. Further, the overall funding for the holiday activities food, the HAF programme, which is established in every local authority area in England and delivers vital support to children and families during school holidays, will again receive more than £200 million in 2025-26. Madam Deputy Speaker, we currently facilitate the process of claiming free meals by providing the eligibility checking system. This is a digital portal available to local authorities and makes verifying eligibility free lunches quick and simple. And I could update the House that this checking system is being redesigned to allow parents and schools to check eligibility independently from their local authorities. This system will make it quicker and easier to check eligibility for school meals and has the potential to further boost take-up by families meeting the eligibility criteria. Further to this, my department is aware of a range of measures that are being implemented by local authorities to boost the take-up of free lunches. We welcome locally led approaches, and I'm personally keen to learn from them. By working directly with their communities, local authorities can overcome the barriers to registering and take action to ensure that families access the support that they are eligible for, subject to these activities meeting legal requirements, including those on data protection. In order to support these local efforts, my department is working with the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology, DCIT, to explore legal gateways that could enable better data sharing. In the meantime, we will continue to engage with a range of stakeholders, including families and young people themselves, as I have done personally, to understand the barriers for households who meet the criteria for a free lunch but are not claiming them, including through working closely with local authorities to understand the approaches that they have taken. So in conclusion, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'd like to thank again my honourable friend, the member for Crawley, for bringing forward this bill on such an important matter, and on a matter which we all agree on in terms of its importance. And I hope it's apparent from my remarks today the government is supportive of the aims of this bill through the work with the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology to explore legal gateways that could enable better data sharing and further consideration of improving free school enrolment through the work of the Child Poverty Task Force. This government is determined to break down the barriers to opportunity for every child, and our work to simplify the enrolment process is important to achieving this aim. We are confident that the previously outlined actions will improve take-up for free meals, alongside the local work being trialled by many local authorities across the country. For that reason, I hope he can be encouraged to withdraw his bill whilst we continue to explore enrolment and keep free school meals under review.
Bambas Charalambos.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I wish to congratulate my honourable friend, the member for Crawley, on his private member's bill on this very important topic, and also on his excellent speech. It's a well-established fact that good nutrition is essential for children's brain development and learning. When children go to school without eating a nutritious meal, or at all, this has a detrimental effect on the children's behaviour and educational performance. Barnardo's latest research, Nourishing the Future, found that 1 in 3 schools said that hunger and food insecurity was impacting on children's ability to learn, including poor concentration, tiredness and behavioural problems. I know, as a school governor, the existing challenges that schools face in dealing with challenging behaviour and getting children to learn, and so anything that helps improve behaviour and learning is to be welcomed. Free school meals are meant to be a lifeline for low-income families to ensure that the most disadvantaged children in society get a free and nutritious meal for each day that they're in school to help them concentrate, learn and achieve. But according to the Child Poverty Action Group, over 900,000 children across the UK don't qualify for free school meals because of restrictive qualifying criteria. And according to the Food Foundation, a further 250,000 children who are eligible are missing out on free school meals for a variety of reasons, including lack of awareness, stigma or embarrassment, the complexity of forms, which I know the Minister has referred to with the new improved checking system, or language barriers. The fact that obtaining free school meals is an opt-in process requiring parents or carers to apply is itself a barrier. If we want our children to flourish and to thrive and get the best start in life they can, then this needs to change. And one of the Labour Party's 5 missions, as the Minister has mentioned, was to break down barriers to opportunity, and I believe this is one of the barriers. The solution to this is auto-enrolment for free school meals, as set out in my honourable friend's speech as he opened this debate. But he's not the only person to be calling for this change. The call has come from many different quarters. In 2021, the Conservative government commissioned Henry Dimbleby, the co-founder of the restaurant chain Leon, to produce a food strategy for the Department of Environment, Food and Rural Affairs. Recommendation 4 of the food strategy was to extend eligibility for free school meals, and one of the 3 ways to achieve that recommendation was to, and I quote, enrol eligible children for free school meals automatically. And the rationale for that recommendation was that even eligible children are often missing out. Currently, free school meals are an opt-in. Parents have to know about the scheme to apply for it. The effect of this is that, according to 2013 estimate by the Department for Education, 11% of children entitled to free school meals do not receive them. In the benefits section of the recommendation 4, it was noted that this would have benefits for those children's health, but also for their educational achievement. Following one pilot of the Universal Free School Meals programme in 2009 to 2011, primary school pupils made between 4 and 8 weeks more progress than expected. Pupils from poorer families and those who had previously done less well at school showed the most improvement. So it was stated there that there was clear education and health benefits for children having a nutritious free school meal. And that came from the Conservative government's food strategy. Sadly, like many of the recommendations in that food strategy, auto-enrolment was not implemented. More recently, in the Education Select Committee's scrutiny of the Children's Wellbeing and Schools Bill report on the 20th of February, paragraph 35, the committee stated, the arguments for auto-enrolment in free school meals for those children currently eligible are conclusive. In the interests of alleviating hunger in schools and improving health and educational outcomes for the poorest children, auto-enrolment must be brought in without delay. We're lucky in London that the Mayor of London, Sir Sadiq Khan, has agreed to fund free lunches for all of London's children in state primary schools, which is already making a difference to children's educational outcomes. And it's a shame that this policy does not apply to secondary schools too. But in the absence of such a policy, auto-enrolment is the best way to ensure that all eligible children get the free school meals that they're entitled to and deserve. And if we're to ensure that children get the best start in life, learn and thrive at school and achieve to their full potential, then auto-enrolling eligible children onto free school meals is the best way forward. We need to remove the barriers to opportunity and, at a stroke, make a huge difference to those children's lives. I know that the government are already doing many good things in education, and the announcement of the Breakfast Club Early Adopters was warmly welcomed by me and I'm sure by all colleagues across both sides of the House. I do hope the government will adopt this policy because it does help alleviate child poverty, it's good for children, and it is the right thing to do. I hear what the Minister has said in relation to the Child Poverty Task Force strategy, and I look forward to hearing them report back later on this year as to what they will do to challenge child poverty. Data sharing is obviously to be very welcomed, and I know the government will do all that they can to ensure that all eligible children for free school meals do get the free school meals that they deserve that would help them learn and thrive. Thank you.
And pay tribute to my friend from Crawley for bringing forward this private member's bill on what is something that, as a former council leader, I saw as a bureaucratic red tape nightmare in communities where you had children who were eligible for free school meals but simply was not accessing them because a form wasn't filled in, even though local authorities and local schools and local communities knew exactly who those children were, but that bureaucracy was getting in the way. I'm really pleased to hear from the Minister, the dispatch box, that he's working with the technology department to look at ways in which data sharing and passport benefit checks could be used to mean that more children get food. I think, however, this is something that has to be looked at in the round. And I've just heard from a constituent this week who's just taken their child out of a breakfast club because the cost of that breakfast club has gone up by £15 a week. Sadly, that school is not a part of the 750 early adopters for breakfast clubs, however, will benefit from that policy initiative as it gets rolled out. I think it's an excellent initiative and we should be proud of it, and we should call on the government to go harder and to go faster in implementing that particular policy. 900,000 more children in working households were living in poverty in 2023 compared to 2010, which means 1,350 children entered poverty every single week for the first 13 years of the Conservatives being in power. And in my area in Telford, absolute poverty rose from 14.9% to 18.4% between 2014 and 2023. But we also know there was a huge amount of other families who weren't in those poverty figures necessarily, but were also struggling to make ends meet. And ultimately, we have to have an economy that is growing and that is getting people into work so that the poverty trap can be removed. I also should declare an interest, like the Shadow Minister did, I suppose, that my wife's a primary school teacher in Telford, and she tells me firsthand about the direct contrast between the children that she teaches now to compare to the cohort of children she taught 20 years ago when she first started to teach. Children that are coming in with major social issues, and those social issues have to be addressed in the whole. I also think that the government needs to take into consideration the huge amount of regional inequality and deprivation that we are seeing. In some parts of the country, for example, under the last Conservative government, child poverty went down, where in my constituency, in my region, child poverty soared. So we do need to make sure that we're engaging with local councils and where there are combined authorities and mayors to ensure that there's a systematic approach to this.
Would you give way?
Of course.
Thank you. I thank my honourable friend for giving way. On that note of working with of the regions, and could I also make the point on nations? Obviously in Wales, all primary school children in Wales have been eligible for free school meals since September last year. So does my honourable friend agree with me that when designing the rollout of free school meals, perhaps in England, the UK government could perhaps learn from some of its experiences in Wales?
I absolutely agree with my honourable friend, and my county borders Wales, so I know Wales very well indeed. And I think that the way in which the Welsh Labour government has approached child poverty and social inequalities more generally is something that the Westminster government absolutely should learn from, and we should congratulate and acknowledge the work of Welsh Labour in that space. I also want to welcome the previous government's household support fund and the extension by this government of that fund. I worked around that fund as a council leader, but also when I was chairing the LGA with Conservative ministers. The absolute approach and ideals around that was absolutely right. However, the one-year nature of that fund means that the money is not being used to the best extent that it could be. So again, it goes back to that point about having that the cross-ministerial task group to look at this in the round. And I'm looking forward to seeing that come forward. And I'll just conclude on this point, which is we've heard a lot this week from the Prime Minister downwards about the need for delivery, about the need for urgent action, and about the ability to make a difference and demonstrate change. We can't be in a position as a Labour government that in 4 or 5 years' time we are pointing to things around bureaucracy and red tape as the reason why we haven't made a huge impact on the poorest children's lives in our country.
Sam Rushworth.
Thank you. And grateful again for the opportunity that this bill has brought for us to put again on record the importance of discussing the scourge of child poverty in our country, and particularly as it relates to children's nutrition. It simply is a fact that where the average height of 5-year-olds was progressively increasing up to 2013, it has since reversed, and children aged 5 are shorter today than they were in the past. It's also the fact that we have the dual burden, not only of stunting, but of obesity. A 30% increase since 2006, and a 22% increase of teenagers with type 2 diabetes since 2017. And all of this points to the poverty of children's diets in this country. And when we have this conversation, for me, it's never a matter of what can we afford to do about it. It's the fact we can't afford not to do something about this, because the knock-on impact on the NHS is immense. The knock-on impact on future work days missed for the next generation will be immense. And it's a sad reality that in a typical UK classroom, as my honourable friend said earlier, 1/3 of children will be living in relative poverty. We also know that children are the group most likely to be living in cold homes in this country. And probably the most startling statistic of all for people from my county, County Durham, that really shows what austerity over the last 1.5 decades has done to our children is that there's been a 250% increase in the number of children in the care system, the cost of which is immense for the local taxpayer, and the human and social cost is immense for them. But somewhere between being in that care system and being a happy child with a healthy life are many children who live in conditions of neglect. And that is why it is so important that the state and the school sometimes does that work where the children are not getting in the home. I hope that the Child Poverty Task Force will report soon and that we will see the start of some positive change. And I welcome the breakfast clubs introduced by this government that will not only make a difference to ensuring that children start the day well fed and having settled, but it will also make a cost of living difference. I met a constituent a few months ago who shared with me that it was costing her £400 a month just to pay for her children to be looked after from the hours of 7:30 till the start of the school day. And that was having a massive impact on her. So for her, that breakfast club is an extra £400 a month. So I'm grateful for that. But I think that what's being proposed today is really quite a small, it's a modest and sensible tweak, really, that addresses the challenge of children not being enrolled. And I'm grateful for the Minister saying a moment ago that the government will look at this, because we cannot afford to allow a generation of children to grow up as they are right now.
Peter. Liam? Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. This bill aims to make a meaningful and lasting difference in the lives of children across our country. We must come together to focus on the very future of our young people, understanding that the way we invest in them today is how we shape our society of tomorrow. The government has been clear in its commitment to addressing child poverty, and I welcome that, and the work already being done through the Ministerial Task Force, which is shaping a long-term strategy to bring about change. That commitment was also evident in the King's speech, where we saw further investment in children's wellbeing through the introduction of breakfast clubs, which I also welcome. Financial support for the least well-off is another key element of our approach, and the additional £1 billion allocated in the most recent budget to the Household Support Fund, as a former councillor, I know will allow local authorities to provide targeted help to those who most need it. We must always ensure that support for families is not just well-intentioned, but also well-delivered. That is why this bill is so important. It removes unnecessary barriers, streamlining the process so that every eligible child is automatically registered for the help they are entitled to. No family should have to navigate unnecessary bureaucracy or miss out due to a lack of awareness. And at the same time, the bill respects parental choice, which I think is incredibly important. It's essential to recognise the most effective way to reduce poverty and improve life chances is by focusing on long-term sustainable economic growth. By fostering a strong economy, we can boost household incomes and ensure that public services remain well-funded and effective. The long-term vision must always be to create an environment where families can thrive, where children can reach their full potential, and where the cycle of poverty can be broken for good. While we work toward that vision, it is important to continue implementing practical, well-targeted measures that can bring about immediate improvements such as this bill. The decisions we make today will shape the society we live in tomorrow. We have a collective... Oh, I've said that bit, sorry. Yes, I will do, thank you.
Before I entered this place, I worked on UK Poverty for Child Poverty Action Group, Oxfam, and Church Action on Poverty. And back then in 2010, it was a cross-party consensus that we should end child poverty. Gordon Brown referred to it as his guiding mission. Should we return to that time?
I thank the Honourable Member for intervening, and I completely agree. Gordon Brown was a wonderful Prime Minister. In conclusion, this bill represents a crucial step in ongoing commitment to tackling child poverty. Thank you.
I beg to move that this debate be now adjourned.
The question is that this debate be now adjourned. As many as that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. Debate to be resumed what day?
Friday, 11th of July.
Friday, the 11th of July.